So this is a fungi that I found when I was going on a hike in mid-February. I was at Mary's Peak near Corvallis. This is the fungi Ganodermacea. Its common name is reishi, that's the Japanese name for it. It has a lot of medicinal properties that people like it for. It's commonly known to help people enhance their immune system, reduce stress, improve sleep, lessen fatigue, help their memory. People will also take it for health conditions like high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And it is a fungi, which means that it is also a decomposer. This is a Copernaceae mushroom. So they're also known as dung mushrooms because they're typically grown in either dung of different animals or just in really wet, moist areas. Their common name is inky cap because the cap of them typically looks darker than the rest. They almost resemble a nipple, and they have a really cool habit of disintegrating as they age. So their caps will go from being the bell shape that we see in this picture to being more flat, and they can even ooze like a strange black goo. And this is actually a mechanism for them maximizing how they can disperse their spores so that they can reproduce. But fun fact, humans have learned how to hijack that process and to use them for ink. So this is Dipsacus fulinum, which is the scientific name for wild teasel, which is an herb. The roots and the leaves can have medicinal properties. People can apply it to their skin for healing wounds and arthritis. You can also use it for scaly, itchy skin like psoriasis. And it is traditionally found in more moist, wet regions like around swamps. So we see two different kinds of plants in this picture. We see what is called the wild sarsaparilla, also known as the spikenard berry, which is in the lower left-hand side, and it is edible. So old Indian tribes used to make tea out of its roots, which can have anti-inflammatory properties. You can also make maple syrup out of it, as well as other kinds of foods and beverages. They would make a paste out of it and could also use it as ink to write. And that is the berry cluster that we see in the lower left-hand side. Now, the mushroom that we see in the photo is Phylloraceae, and it's also known as honey mushroom. It often has a sticky cap with black hairs, and it has gills underneath it. It grows in clusters near the base of trees or stumps. It really likes oak trees, and it likes to be buried underneath wood too. And it usually appears after the autumn. Now, fungi are decomposers, which means that they will often destroy any wood or trees that they are growing on. They particularly like to grow on dead trees, and they will often destroy the cambium and the lignin found within the trees that they're growing in, because fungi have this enzyme called endoglucosinase and B-glucosidase and xylanases, which degrades the wood within the trees that they're growing on. So they will rapidly kill the wood and the cambium and the tissue between the bark and the wood. This is one of my favorite fungi. It is a tremella mushroom, more commonly known as a jelly fungus or also known as snow fungus. And it definitely likes to grow in the snow or in very wet areas. It does have some medicinal benefits. It can help clear heat and dryness within your throat, and it can also help replenish fluids in your body to treat chest congestion, asthma, or even constipation, and balance blood sugar levels and cholesterol. It reduces LDLs, and it helps also be an anti-inflammatory. It's more traditionally used within Chinese medicine. So this is a very common mushroom called Tuberia. That's its scientific name, and its common name is scurfy twiglet, which is pretty cute. We commonly will find it within bark chips and within very wet little pieces of wood, which makes sense because that's where we see it in this photo as well. I found this on the Clark College campus in mid-January. Now, its spores are pretty small, and they do reproduce pretty quickly. You will typically see dozens of very small fungi within very close proximity to each other, which we see in this photo as well. and it often is found in very wet climates. So here we have another kind of jelly fungi, which is its common name, and its scientific name is Dacryma stacey, and they also like to grow on very wet surfaces and some wet wood. They're often seen by hikers because they like to grow on the wet parts of wood, maybe fallen logs on the side of trails, which is where I saw this one. And the best time to see them is in the fall or the springtime below melting snowbanks. They have a rubbery type flesh that might protect them from drying out, and it protects them against freezing. They're not typically poisonous, but they can be. And because they are a fungi, they are a decomposer. So again, they will be rotting on the cambium of different fallen trees, and they typically like fallen logs that are already dead. So here we see another Gatoderma lucidum, which is another kind of fungi that is loosely related to the reishi that we saw earlier. So they are of a similar species, but kind of a different family. They do both like to live in those wet, humid environments, and they will feed off of the lignin and the cambium present in the wood of a tree. And they are parasitic, so they will break down whatever host tree that they attach themselves to, which is typically dead wood already, because live trees do have defense mechanisms to fight off fungi from growing on them, because they will destroy the root system of the tree by breaking down that cambium. Fungi do have enzymes and proteins that speed up chemical reactions in order to do this, to rot the wood of the tree that they're on. These enzymes split many of the lignan's chemical bonds, turning it into a simple sugar and releasing carbon dioxide into the air for us to be able to breathe. And they do engage with other parts of the ecosystem, because different types of deer or rabbits or raccoons might eat these fungi. This particular one is not poisonous, so it is safe for other animals and critters to eat. So it is living in a symbiosis type of relationship with other creatures in its ecosystem. Here we see a boletus mushroom. Its common name is porcini, which is actually a common mushroom to cook with. People like to cook it in Italian foods or different kinds of pastas. And if you get the edible kind, they are very tasty, but it is hard to distinguish between them, and they do have poisonous lookalikes, so I don't recommend going out into nature and picking one that you think looks like this, because it could be a different kind of mushroom, and they can be kind of hard to distinguish between them. But they are edible if you find the right ones. I found this particular mushroom at a higher elevation when I was hiking the Mount Hood National Forest, so they do typically like those higher climates. So here we have another mushroom that is of the Ganoderma family. The order is the Polyparalis, the class is the Agaricomycetes, and then the family is the Basodiomycota. I'm trying to pronounce all of those correctly, but essentially there are multiple different kinds of fungi that fall into this class in phylum. We've seen a few other mushies in this video that look very similar to this one, and they all have very different characteristics. So fun fact about fungi, they can look very different, but they can be within the same family, order, class, and even phylum. So we've seen a few other mushi that also fall into these categories, but they can potentially be poisonous because they do have several lookalikes. So definitely make sure that you have someone with you who can identify them very well before you go into nature and try to pick these, and definitely do not eat them unless you know for sure what you have. So here we have an agaricus mushroom. It belongs to the family Agaricaceae and the phylum Basodiomycota fungi. And if you get the correct kind of agaricus mushroom, they are traditionally believed to fight physical and emotional stress and stimulate the immune system and improve the quality of life for people who have diabetes. It can reduce cholesterol and prevent osteoporosis, and it can help with peptic ulcers and treat circulatory and digestive problems. And a lot of mushrooms even have anti-cancerous properties that can help with tissues and inflammation. But again, it is kind of difficult to identify these mushrooms, so don't try to go out into nature and pick them yourselves unless you know exactly what they are. This is a Rosula mushroom, and if you find ones that are edible, they can be used in traditional Chinese medicine, and they have been used before for the treatment of liver disease, different kinds of eye problems and chest problems, and they have lectins that are isolated from Delica, shown as inhibin towards HIV-1, and they have reverse transcriptase, which makes this possible, so their lectins do have potential to be used for medicinal treatments. However, there are toxic Rosulas, so if you eat one that is toxic, they have very bad gastrointestinal symptoms such as nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, and you can colic, you can have really bad abdominal cramps, and this goes for several other types of mushrooms as well. So if you don't know what it is, do not pick them or eat it.